So guys, most folks here don't realize that LMU is having serious discussions about adding immersive storytelling to the curriculum, to the tools that we provide students in terms of developing filmmakers, storytellers. So Josh, I'm gonna, and some of them are right here, a recent graduate and doing good work in the industry. But Josh, I want you to just give us a quick overview of like what's currently in our program in terms of immersive storytelling and tools that we're providing.
Sure, there's a handful of classes that are already available for students. VR Studio, which Shane has taught a couple times in the past, and Eric Elder's teaching right now. That's in the animation program. Then there's, I believe there's a VR screenwriting class or immersive. And within the School of Film and Television in particular, and actually at the university at large, we're sort of branding VR, AR, XR, MR sort of as immersive technology. I think that's sort of a really good, inclusive, interdepartmental, interprogram kind of term to use for it. So there's a handful of classes that are, there's a lot of classes that in the business school, or I should say a handful in the business school that are using VR and are talking about creating VR content and pitching ideas for it. And then there's a number of classes that you wouldn't necessarily think include immersive technology as part of the curriculum, as part of the coursework. There's a chemistry class, Robert Center. It's, I think, a first-year chemistry class, introductory elementary chemistry class that uses VR, an app that was developed by chemistry educators. So it's a little rough around the edges as far as the interactivity, and that's something big that we're looking at the university level for being able to create tools so that faculty can include immersive content as part of their educational lecture process. But basically in that app, students, they put on the headset and they manipulate molecules and balance equations and do sort of the things that traditionally are done in textbooks and on paper, they're now doing in a VR space. There's an engineering class, an architectural class that's using VR. They're able to turn off the walls and look at the rebar inside and turn off the floor and look at the plumbing and do those sort of things. But again, that app leaves much to be desired because it was developed by people just sort of playing with VR and not necessarily geared towards that. So we're hoping in the future that we'll be creating, within the university, we can create content that will help our instructors include immersive content as part of their curriculum.
No, it's wonderful that engineering and chemistry are actually reaching out and trying to be on the cutting edge and trying to explore their content with a new tool. I know that the M School also does VR development as well.
Yep.
Shane, I know we have a relationship with Sony Innovation Studios. Can you tell the group a little bit just about what that relationship is?
Well, I mean, it's at the beginning stages, right? We've had a couple of discussions with them, and I mean, there's a lot of interest in exploring. I mean, this technology is developing so quickly, right? And lots of times a tool will come along and it's about how do we use this tool, right? And what better place to experiment than an educational environment, right? And so we've been exploring how we can sort of explore some of this amazing technology that's being developed by that studio and harness that for storytelling. And for immersive experiences in VR. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're still walking down that road, but it's really exciting.
Well, it's good. Again, have a partner here in the neighborhood in Culver City, a big studio that again is on the cutting edge. I know that it's wonderful that the faculty provides advice and direction for cinematography, for animation. We get students to use 360 cameras and edit in terms of to get the immersive experience all together. But I want to go to some of the other guys, and see what you guys think about what the university can be doing. What sort of tools should we be showcasing for the students in terms of cultivating their ability to tell stories in an immersive experience?
John, you want to start or you want me to start?
Yeah, let me start with you, sir.
Me? Okay.
As a recent graduate, tell us where you are and tell us what you think.
I mean, I can give a quick background on me real quick. So I graduated in 2015, not too long ago. And then I worked with Justin for a while. He hired me like the day after I graduated.
He was one of my students here. So.
Yeah, actually all of them were my professors. And we worked on like high-profile VR pieces for a couple of years and some feature film VFX. And we worked on like Crimson Peak VR and New York Times and some other big ones. And then I left that job to start my own studio a couple years ago. That was like 2.5 years ago now. And so we're called Warm and Fuzzy, and we're in Culver City. And we do like all sorts of animation and design work. We've done like a lot of VR projects. Last summer we did like a big one that Justin directed, Night Flyers. It was for this sci-fi TV show, and it was like a 3-part episodic VR thing. It was like a huge shoot in Ireland and spaceship set and all sorts of crazy stuff. So that's a quick rundown on me. What was the question?
Circling back. So tools, what tools do you think, I mean, obviously you picked up a lot of, immersive storytelling skills on your own, but also here at LMU.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the key tools do you think students need to pick up and understand to be successful and grow their skills in immersive storytelling?
So I feel like immersive storytelling is kind of like a combination of like technical skill and filmmaking and artistry. So, you can be a filmmaker, but you also do need like a certain level of like technical know-how, whether that be like programming or, just knowing how to use like software tools like Unreal or Unity or, Maya and like 3D programs, and just having like an understanding of like how it works, because it is like way more complicated than just like shooting a film. So
Now, does everyone know what Unreal and Unity is when he's using these industry terms? No. Anyone not? Okay. So Unreal and Unity are gaming engine programming code. So when you think of interactive games, those are the tools that create a 3D environment, and with programming helps you manipulate your environment, manipulate your characters in 3D space to tell stories. And so those gaming engines that were primarily used in interactive games have now moved into the immersive storytelling space. So,
in fact, there's whole movie productions that use Unity or Unreal for like a lot of virtual cinematography. The new Lion King film, one of the professors who teaches our motion capture class at the moment, who's also an alum, and he worked on Lion King and the virtual cinematography aspect of it. I believe they were using Unity for their pipeline. And then those are actually a couple of the classes that I teach. The Advanced Interactive, we use Unreal, and I know they use Unreal in the VR Studio class. Eric's using it right now in the VR Studio class, and I have a few students that are also in my Advanced Interactive class. One of them in particular wants to use it for her thesis. Mm-hmm. We had one VR thesis project that was done in Unreal, and that was very much like at the university, at least within the animation department, the VR or the immersive initiative has very much been student-led. We had students come to us and say, like their junior year, hey, for our senior thesis, we want to do a VR project, and we didn't have the equipment, but we got the equipment really fast, and Shane was teaching, I think, the class the next semester, and it was really sort of interesting to, as a department, scramble to be able to support what they're doing, and very much knowing what, being keyed into people in the industry to be able to know which things should we be teaching our students so that when they graduate, they'll have those skills.
Well, no, I think it's wonderful. Again, it's not every film school that's going to let a student say, hey, I want to do a VR thesis project, and let them venture down that road and rally to sort of support that effort. Yeah. You mentioned motion capture. I don't know if everyone knows what motion capture is. Can you guys just explain motion capture for those in the room that may not have actually experimented in that area?
Well, since you've combined both
VR and motion capture. I want to go back to your previous question real quick, though.
Okay, please do.
So one thing, even mentioning the game engines themselves, the industry at large is actually getting away from calling them game engines anymore and now calling them real-time engines. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because they're not just used for games. They're used for so many purposes now. That's just one of them, being like this AR wall concept where they put what they call an IMU on the camera, and even when you change the perspective of the camera, the game engine or the real-time engine is actually shifting that view. So it's called doing visual effects in camera, which saves a lot on the back end, but creates a lot more work on the front end. So it completely changes like our pre-production process for film and things like that. So I think it's good to think about the fact that this has become so interdisciplinary, and that's something that every student that comes out, anyone who graduates, anyone who decides to get into the industry at large, it's not just that it's splintering off into all of these things, it's that you kind of have to have a decent understanding of all of them across the board. As a creator, I've been asked to do everything from direct a live dance piece for an audience with no technology, all the way through doing one of my last pieces, which was called Chained to Victorian Nightmare, which was a immersive theater piece that used VR to completely immerse you into this Victorian England world. And we had a live actor motion captured with both body, face, and fingers all going through the Unreal Engine. So, that's just a tiny example. And now I'm directing game cinematics. So even though I'm not using the game engines for that, we are having to then make sure it feels the same, and we're doing it much more in like a feature animation style pipeline. And I'm only talking about the last 2 years of my career. Right. So like that's kind of the breadth of what you're expected to understand. Right. And I think that's where it can get super overwhelming, right? Like especially 19, 20, 21 years old, and you're like, wow, there's just like so much that I have to pay attention to. It's exciting in one sense, but also like how do I know what to focus on? Right. And I think that's an area where we have to help them understand that you just need to be familiar with these things. You don't have to be an absolute expert on every little detail, right. But you need to know who to call upon. Right,
right. Same thing like cinematography, lighting, editing. Yeah. Again, you can find the experts who can help you as long as you have a general understanding of the technology and the story and what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
And then the motion capture. I forgot I didn't answer that part. So I actually designed and set up our first motion capture studio here 5 years ago, or longer than that now. Yeah.
Almost 10.
Don't tell me that. So motion capture is, there's many forms of it, but the primary focus of it is to capture movement of the human body. So it's doing acting with an actor in the space and then applying that to an avatar, whether that be a 3D figure that'll be put on film, whether that'll be something that goes into a game engine, whether that be something that's live. Typically the idea is that you want to capture the raw performance from a quality actor and have a way to apply that to various mediums.
Right. Now, did anyone see the Magic Leap piece that's here in the portal today? I mean, this weekend? There's a beautiful magic piece where they're doing a Shakespearean presentation, and there's a actual character, a real captured character of them. But that's volumetric capture. Right. You guys want to explain the difference between motion capture and what volumetric capture is?
I mean, where motion capture, you're capturing basically rotation and positional data of a figure. It's all captured through a suit, and then you can apply that to any kind of avatar 3D character you want. When we're talking about the volumetric capture, you're actually capturing a physical body in space, and you're able to sort of not only capture the three-dimensional volume of that, but also the texture of that as well. And it's voxelized, right? So it's different. It's a different way of computing the space. It's actually little tiny cubes that compose that body. And then you can take that sort of solid form performance and put it into a virtual space, and it feels like there's something physically there.
And it becomes a 3D element itself that you can manipulate.
Yeah, and then you can further manipulate, and I think there's a couple of examples out here where they, you can run filters through that and really kind of play around with that as well.
Right. I think the biggest difference between them, other than some of the technical, is that you're genuinely capturing that person in that space. So it's very much like filming them, but you just happen to be able to put a new camera on that anywhere you want, or throw it into VR or augmented reality with your phone or things like that. But you're genuinely capturing that person in that space.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a lot more immediate, right? The data that you capture, I mean, you've got to process it, but it's a little bit more immediate than motion capture, which takes, you've got to refine the data, but it also allows the ability to sort of tweak that, right, to a certain degree, and change, animate on top of that performance as well. So I think it's harder to do when you're talking about a volume capture, right?
Yeah,
well, but that said, for mocap with Chained, I had a live actor in the space, and it was immediate. Like that person, you were looking at them, and they would touch you, and they looked like a ghost in that space. So
which
there
is
are
really
ways around that.
Because that's brand new. That ability to do this, which is amazing, right?
Did you have, so for motion capture, you're basically just capturing certain points on the actor. It's the black suit with the dots a lot of times, what you see. I mean, you guys have probably seen it in behind the scenes. It's all like Gollum, Avatar, that sort of stuff. So you had somebody in suits. Did they have markers on their face then for the facial capture?
No, we used a system called Dynamics that has a single camera here, and it's actually mapped to the features of their face already. So we do what we call a facial ROM ROM stands for range of motion, and so we have them kind of do this funny. It looks like an
stuff,
acting exercise, like with their face, and then that makes it where it understands how the 3D model matches that, and so their performance then gets live mapped onto the avatar.
Yeah, we've since added faceware to our
nice.
system, so
That's
for
awesome.
the last couple of years.
No, and I brought up Volumetric Capture only because I'm actually doing a project where it's a dramatic story with 7 characters volumetrically captured. And so not only are we creating a 3D environment, but we're actually placing our characters to interact with each other within that 3D world that, again, you see only through the Magically. So it's all sort of projected, augmented.
The volumetric is another thing that the Sony relationship, they came and checked out our space, and they have, I mean, I was gonna say, I don't think we're allowed to talk about a lot of the stuff they're doing, but they're doing a lot of crazy, cool volumetric stuff. I know they did some stuff for their new Men in Black, and
Right.
that seems to be another avenue for these technologies, and as they merge more, you'll be able to change things within the space. And
That's actually a really good point, just because sometimes we talk about these technologies and they sound just so like amorphous and they're constantly changing, and you're just going, how does this apply if I'm still more interested in traditional film? And the reality is we use them constantly in traditional film now, whether it be taking a version of a set that hasn't been built yet and throwing that into VR so you can set scout and make sure that that's working right, whether you're creating a new monster. Aaron Sims has become a really big fan of this. They'll do their sculpts and then export them, and then they'll look at it in headset and say, okay, does this 10-foot monster actually feel like the right size? And they know before they've ever gone out to set and shot anything whether or not this works. And I think volumetric capture is another example of that.
And do they use it as a tool to help actors like get a sense of?
Absolutely.
Because often, an actor will just be in a green screen set, right? And they're supposed to be interacting with this giant cyclops or something, but they have no real context, right?
Yeah, and that is something that's starting to happen. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of that, especially as we get into some more wireless technology. Like 5G is going to make a big difference on your ability to stream from a really powerful computer directly to headset.
Right.
And I think that we're going to see things like that proliferate a lot onto the set naturally.
So circling back to the working with students. So as we think about the next wave of students coming to LMU, what are the things we want to, tell them? What are the sort of the things we want to encourage them to study, to learn, to master, in addition to the traditional storytelling techniques?
well, one of the things that it's very much been a sort of co-production between the film school, Dean Reisky and Dean Cho in the Seaver Science and Engineering. We're basically trying to create a focus for students that really want to focus on interactive gaming and immersive. So we're in the works of going through a long process. It's a very rigorous process, and it's necessary to make sure that everything is student-oriented towards their goals at the university level, but we're working on, we're calling it IGGY, I guess, Interactive Gaming and Immersive Minor. So it's a set of classes. It's primarily, actually, the nice part about it, one of the things that we discovered as we started this process is we realized we already have a whole bunch of classes that sort of would fit this specific minor, and there might be, I think, a capstone class that we would create to sort of create an opportunity for the students to create a thesis project or a singular project that they can take all of the information that they've learned in the various classes that, again, at the moment already exist, but allow them to create some sort of focused project that's either a game or something immersive. But yeah, so it's our interactive gaming immersive minor that hopefully, I don't know, students that have started now, would potentially be able to have on their diploma. And then that's the starting point for what might ultimately evolve into a specific major, maybe even a grad program. We'll see what ends up happening. But it's very much in its infancy, but we're thinking that sort of long-term goal so that we are equipping our students with the skills that they need to be able to get jobs in this space.
And that's what it is. It's all about thinking long-term. So you're giving them immediate skills now, but also what's coming down the road and what skills to help them succeed in the future, because the technology will continue to march forward.
It's totally evolving faster than we can keep up. I mean, it's really wild. Just even seeing this event and how much it's matured between the exhibits from last year, and it's really exciting how much it's evolving and growing and maturing.
Great. Let's talk about storytelling. So what skills do we want to sort of encourage students to use or develop as they try to cultivate stories with an immersive approach to it? Any ideas on storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of partially answers your previous question that Josh was just hitting on as well, is really understanding the separation of this as one part of it is technology, but there's also like new creative mediums being born out of this. And I think that's maybe been one of the things that was confusing for people when VR first became a thing. It was like, well, is it technology? Is it just a new gaming platform? Is it a way to tell stories? And the real answer is yes to all of those. But it can make it a little confusing when you're trying to focus on learning about those things. And so when it comes to the storytelling side of it, I think that, you know, as a creator myself, you want to be a student of all methods of storytelling anyways. And I think often with film, we have kind of like honed in, and we kind of ignore a lot of other mediums when we're learning about it. And with this, I feel like we should go the opposite direction. Go see as much dance as you can. Go to immersive theater is exploding in this city and in New York right now. I highly recommend going to see immersive theater because they're playing with new methods of acting that we've never seen before right now. And some of that's actually starting to make its way to film and to VR and other mediums as well. So I think it's just being a student of storytelling, because the way we're telling stories is fundamentally changing.
Fantastic.
They don't have Sleep No More here, do they? It's only
Not yet.
Okay.
It's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should tell them about Sleep No More. That's a cool thing.
So what did it take? Did it take a certain amount of unlearning when you first started working in
Oh,
VR?
absolutely.
Right.
That's actually a kind of a fascinating one, especially when you're talking about 360 video. You know, you're immediately going, well, I'm here with a camera. I'm going to film people. Let me find, here's my good low angle, you know, that I've always trusted when
Right.
I've been telling stories, and then you get it back and you're like, wow, this is terrible.
Yeah,
like,
so disorientating,
yeah,
right?
and so I think there's a lot where you assumed because you were using similar types of people on set, similar types of technology, that you should be filming things in a similar fashion. And the reality is it's much more similar to theater than it is to film in that sense.
So
but
like less cuts and more intricate kind of blocking and staging?
Yeah, you kind of have to let things breathe, you know, and you have to be okay with not being this close to everything all the time. And I think that that's something, especially with modern cinema, is that we've become very accustomed to actually being really comfortable counting the pores on someone's nose. And that's just not
And
a
rapid cutting cinema
rapid
too, right?
fire, yeah, absolutely. And when you want to let a story unfold in something like VR as a medium, you kind of need to allow the viewer or guest, or depending on what type of experience, whatever you want to call them, you really kind of need to give them time to feel safe. Because one of the things that happens when you put a headset on is fight or flight kicks in. And you don't realize it's happening because it's subtle, and we're all used to trying some new tech. So you're just like, oh, well, I'm just trying this new thing. But you're not realizing you actually feel a little uncomfortable at first. And it's not about the thing strapped to your face. It's about the fact that you've just been dropped into a completely different world.
It's like vulnerable.
Yes,
to a certain
exactly.
degree, right?
Yeah. And whether you realize it or not, your crocodile brain is going, am I safe? Do I need to run? Do I fight? Like, what's happening right now? And you kind of have to let people settle in. And so the pace of storytelling is quite different because of that. And that was definitely a mistake that I made early on, where I was like, oh, well, I established my location, let's go to the next thing. And then you realize, like, you were frightening people, and I wasn't even, and don't get me wrong, I love my horror projects, but, like, that's not always the purpose, you know?
Yeah.
And so you really have to let it breathe.
And movements are really a tough thing too, right? I mean, it's because you're dealing with a range of people who are experiencing this, right? The hardcore gamers, I mean, you can whip them around in VR and they're fine, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, my mom goes in there and the camera moves a little bit and it's a very disorienting, nauseating experience, right? So,
Yeah.
Well, that's why games work a little better sometimes too, because you're controlling the movement yourself rather than the camera moving and you don't know where it's going to go.
right.
But even then, like, I mean, the worst VR-induced nausea I've had, and I've had a few episodes of it. One of them was just a camera that started rising up, and I was not ready for it at all. Unmotivated camera moves. Just my brain went, whoa, wait, I'm not actually moving. What's happening? It was this weird sinking feeling. And the other one was playing a game and teleporting rapidly multiple times. And it's that moment of just like disorientation of, wait, where the heck am I? There was a swarm of robots on me a second ago, and I'm trying to get away. And it was sort of weird that my brain just, I went flop sweat and got dizzy, and I didn't even get a chance to take the headset off. I just had to lay on the floor for a little bit. It was just thinking about it again. I'm starting to feel nauseous.
All right, deep breath.
Do you need to lay down?
And also intensity of experience too, right? I mean,
Yep.
and we've all probably experienced horror in VR, right? It's really
Visceral.
intense, right? It's visceral, right? And I don't know what it is. It's the immersion, is it? Is it the
Yeah,
sense
well,
that it's
you're-
coming from all sides, or
When you're watching television or something on our phones, which is how we're mostly watching things these days, or even in a movie theater, I can see the row of people in front of me. I'm still in a safe space. As much as the
Right.
lights have been dimmed and everything else, there's still this separation of you and the screen. And that allows us to feel that just safe enough that we enjoy the danger we see on screen. But then when you're in VR and you lose that, you genuinely feel a lot more vulnerable and a lot less safe. And that's actually hitting a different part of your brain chemically than watching film does.
And that's I think it's an important tool that filmmakers need to figure out. It's like, I'm trying to tell a story, I'm trying to evoke a certain emotion, and am I going too far? Is the movement too intense? Is it too scary or too making someone too vulnerable? And just the way you play with an edit to see if the edit's working right in terms of a certain cut or a certain flow in a scene, the same thing applies to this technology where is it evoking the emotion that I want? Is it too much or too little?
That's an excellent point, because it's not about doing those things is wrong. It's like, what is your intent?
Right.
And is this achieving that intent? And because some people are going to love those, and some people are going to love that sinking feeling and things like that, and also we're just going to get better at watching these things.
Yep.
I saw the film Common Ground, which is literally playing on the other side of that wall right there, and it's a how many have seen it? Any, just a few of you have seen it? Okay, lovely piece about a housing project in London, but it uses all the classic sort of film techniques of a voiceover and narration, and but it has superimpositions and flashbacks and sort of transitions and dissolves, and really just wonderful sort of filmmaking tools, but applied in a 360 environment with certain interactive moments that are smartly applied to enhance the storytelling and enhance the messaging, but not overdone where it's just like technique for technique. It's really what serves the story best. Towards that end, I know you guys have seen a number of the pieces here. Are there any particular ones that you would say, listen, I've got to show my students this one, and I've got to show this section to the students to teach them this particular sort of tool or technique? We'll start with you, Shane, and we'll work our way back.
I am remiss because I have not been able to experience much here. So I know, but you guys were talking about like Wolves on the Wall being
Wolves on the
particularly,
Wall,
right?
yeah,
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about
Definitely Wolves on the Walls, which is only the first part of what will eventually be, I think, a 3-part thing. Neil Gaiman, it's based on a Neil Gaiman book. I can't remember the name of the person who co-wrote it with.
Oh, was it Dave McKean?
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned about being in a safe space, because there's a moment when I was experiencing Wolves on the Walls. Luckily, it was a sort of calm moment in between. And that's one of the things that I think, having a fundamental understanding of filmmaking in general, that's things that we do in just traditional filmmaking. The idea of you don't want it to be just constant go, 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 go the whole time. You want to have sort of calm moments to give your audience a break between crazy stuff. I mean, there's always those moments in horror films where everybody sort of regroups a little bit, and that's something you're letting your audience do. But there was a moment in Wolves on the Walls where the person next to me, because there's 2 stations, she was on the ground. Well, basically, while I was experiencing it, suddenly somebody was at my ankles, and I sort of lifted the headset a little bit, and there was a girl on the ground that was waving at stuff because she was exploring at a moment. Luckily, it was not an intense moment of that. And not to spoil anything, but it does get crazy intense at the end, and I decided that was the last thing that I did yesterday, because I had to take a break a little bit. I'd even called my wife. I was like, I need a little bit of reality for a little bit. But that, at Wolves on the Walls, absolutely. And in the Traveling While Black, like, I was weeping, and that it's really sort of an amazing thing. It's, as a experience, I mean, this idea of immersion, sitting in a diner booth with Tamir Rice's mother and having her turn and look at me while she's describing this absolutely horrible thing that she's gone through was, I mean, that just, and then I started to like look away, which was sort of interesting. I do that in sad scenes in a regular movie theater where it's like, I'm going to stare at the exit sign for a little bit to let my, but as I stared away, I was looking at somebody else who was gathered in that diner. It's 360, so I could not look away, and I looked right at another person in the background who was actually crying in it, and it was like, just
That is-
it just killed me.
Yeah, that's something right there that I think 360 video, I have things that I love about it. I have some issues with it. That said, as a documentary tool, I think it is more powerful than traditional film. There are so many times where, and now we've learned how often we've been lied to when we've been looking at a documentary piece of film, and we know that they have framed something up just perfectly, and the whole rest of the world that's going on in that moment, and you're not really seeing the truth. You're only seeing the filmmaker's truth there, and it could be extremely misleading. But in this sense, Waves of Grace is an excellent example of that. It's a piece that was by Verse Studios, it's Chris Milk project, and it's actually about these Ebola camps. And you go fully in and you watch them having to remove the people from the homes and how they're trying to scrub everything down, and then you see this child waiting in a hospital bed, and I remember looking away, tried to do the exact same thing as you, and I looked away just because I just couldn't focus on that moment anymore, and I just see like the biggest roach I've ever seen just like crawl from under the hospital bed, and that was what I experienced looking away, and then I just lost it. I was like, I was just done, you know? But as a documentary tool, it is unparalleled.
You know, this really is a field that is changing constantly, and as someone who's been involved with education for a while, one of the great responsibilities we feel is to always make sure that our students are prepared for a world in which things are going to be changing constantly. So part of the role of education is to help people have resilience, flexibility, to be problem solving and looking ahead, and to give them a safe place to experiment, which is what we're trying to do with this. So I thank you again, all of you, for doing it. And I want to thank you all for spending the weekend with us. I don't know how many of you were able and how many exhibits you were able to see, but I'm really excited that we happen to have been able to do this partnership with Film Independent and to bring some of the best programming in this area that is being developed around the globe. So I have to again give my props and thanks to Film Independent, to Josh Welsh, and to Jacqueline for the amazing program that she put together. And I know that I personally can hardly wait to see what she puts together for next year. I think that the other thing, again, is thank you for joining in the experiment, which is basically what all of this is right now. I think we're all beginning to learn about how to use this power wisely, right? I mean, everybody, the cliche is it's an empathy machine, but you can't ever let it become a cliche, because the truth is this stuff gets in your head in a way like nobody's business, as you pointed out. So we will use, like Spider-Man, we will use our power wisely. So thanks, rock and roll, and my thanks to all of you again.